Welcome to Living a Luxury Lifestyle, where we talk with influencers in luxury lifestyle products and services from around the globe. I'm your host, Cliff Perotti. Welcome to the first episode of Living a Luxury Life, a podcast dedicated to the luxury lifestyle. Our first guest on the show will be Chris Olshan, the CEO of the Luxury Marketing Council. Before joining the Luxury Marketing Council in 2010, he was a licensed real estate broker in Pennsylvania. He is a serial entrepreneur with his first venture started at 18, but we'll let him tell you about that. He is an authority on the luxury market and its customers. He helps develop strategies and tactics for selling to the ultra-high net worth individual. He has lectured at NYU Stern Graduate School of Business, Fordham University, Kent State's undergraduate school, and has been a keynote speaker at a number of conferences, including the Luxury Interactive Conference and the Brand Innovators Conference. Chris splits his time between New York and Pennsylvania, where he lives with his wife, 2 children, and 2 dogs. All right. Well, welcome to the show, Chris. It's great to have you on.
Thanks so much, Cliff. I really appreciate being here with you.
Well, so let's start by, I'd like to start with a little bit of conversation about you and your background. I'd like to treat this conversation not so much like an interview, but more like we're sitting around the kitchen table having a glass of wine or a cup of coffee. In my case, I'm sticking with the coffee.
Yeah, on our side, it just turned noon, so I'm doing the same. And actually, that's honestly the way, that's kind of the theme of our life. That's the way we have always worked. That's the way I've always done business. It should kind of feel like we're sitting around the table having a chat as opposed to an interview.
Exactly. And I think it also lends itself to just kind of sharing ideas as we go and just letting it organically flow.
Yep.
So let's start by, tell us a little bit about you and your background and how did you end up at the Luxury Marketing Council?
Oh, all right. So this is an interesting and long story. I've kind of known, I've had a knack for kind of sales and marketing my whole life. My first business venture, which I say somewhat jokingly, but is accurate, is at 3 years old. I dug up my parents' backyard, put the dirt in produce bags, stuck the bags in my wagon, and walked around my neighborhood block because I wasn't allowed to cross the street, but I was allowed to walk around my neighborhood block. Uh-huh. And I went door to door selling potting soil at 25 cents a bag. At the end of the day, all the soil I had left, I made my dad buy back to fill in the hole in the garage, in the backyard.
Oh God!
So that was kind of the first aha from my parents that it would be sales and marketing as my career. Mm-hmm. Opened my first business at 15. Tried to do consulting work, and found there were a few brands that gave me the time of day and had conversations, and I did a little bit of business, but obviously a 15-year-old going into any business and saying, I can help you with your marketing and sales was a stretch and very hard to do, especially because it was, hey, if you hire me, you have to sign the checks to my parents because I'm not old enough to have a bank account.
That's funny.
So that obviously caused some issues with really getting that moving at that point. Mm-hmm. Skipped a year plus a high school, was in college by the time I was 16. And when I turned 18, I opened my first legal business in my own name. We were living in Pennsylvania, and I realized there was a huge gap as the area was being developed. There were lots of high-end homes, mm-hmm. and there were no cleaning companies in the area. You had Merry Maids as a franchise 40 miles away, and that was it. And I said, well, gee, I know a bunch of people that I went to high school with that didn't go to college. They were looking for jobs. And why not open a cleaning company for high-end homes and see what we can do?
Right.
As luck would have it, it took off. It was, I was making more money than I should have been at way too young of an age. Mm-hmm. And it tripped me into the car business. I wound up buying all of my cars from a local dealership. And the dealership made a comment to me at one point where, when you buy your 10th car, we'll hire you so you can get a discount.
Oh, okay.
The day I bought my 11th, they offered me a job.
Oh, my Lord.
And so I did about 6 months in the car industry and basically started to see all these gaps in how dealerships operated. It was, we have 50 cars on the lot, and every time a customer comes in, we're going to convince you that one of these cars is exactly what you want. The interesting thing about this is, living in Pennsylvania, we had the world's largest auto auction in our backyard.
Okay.
And so I started to say, why are we convincing customers to buy a specific car of our 50 when we have 20,000 available every Friday at this auction 20 minutes away, and can basically buy them whatever they want, not have to hold inventory, not have anywhere near as much overhead, and see a better profit while passing part of that savings on to the customer.
Interesting.
Well, of course, it was a franchise dealership. They had no interest in that, and they basically told me to shut up and sell cars.
Although I got to say, that's right in line with, and we'll talk about this, the personalization of the shopping experience. You were way ahead of your time on that one.
So I made it about a month longer before I finally said, I am just tired of this, and decided to quit. And when I put my notice in, the general manager of the dealership had been in about the same position I was and said, I've had my belly full of, pushing cars that customers don't want. And he said, I'd love to launch this idea with you and see what we can do. And so for the next 3 or 4 years, we built the first virtual dealership, and we're delivering cars up and down the East Coast direct to customers. No space we needed other than where we held our license. The vehicles were bought, detailed, delivered right to the customer's door. They had a day to try them out. And, we never had to take a return because everybody was thrilled. Fast forward 2005, we're getting into higher and higher end cars, and the founder of the Luxury Marketing Council, who happens to be my uncle, called me and said, hey, I have an opportunity for you. I've met with a company that's joined the council. They are going to host the first fine motor auction in Manhattan in partnership with Cruise International. And I thought this could be of interest.
Right.
So at that point, I joined the council for 2 years, had some introductions made to this company. We put together the first Luxury Life Expo and fine motor auction in Manhattan.
Okay.
This is 2005. And they picked an interesting window of September 9, 10, and 11.
Oh my God. Oh shit.
We consigned 50 vehicles worth $5.7 million. And we're the largest consigner at the auction.
Wow.
All over the country. Everything from one of Mike Tyson's Bentleys to one of 10 Lamborghinis in the country. Long and short, it was a brilliant concept, and we handled every part of our partnership perfectly. There was one thing that they forgot to do: invite customers.
Oh my.
So of the 10,000 people that they expected to come through the doors over 3 days, they had 300.
Oh wow.
Needless to say, it didn't work. So that was kind of the first time I was actually kicked in the teeth in business, and had to kind of go back, lick my wounds, and figure out what was next. And one of the things that I realized from it was my initial idea of consulting and helping businesses suddenly made more sense, because I was raising the alarm about all of these issues in advance.
Right.
And nobody was really hearing them. So I started to do some strategic consulting after this, and that led me back into the auto business, because obviously I had a lot of dealerships say, you have an expertise in this, sales. We'd love to talk to you and better understand what we can kind of do to improve our businesses. That led to a couple of dealerships asking me to come in as a partner and kind of re-step into the auto industry, which I wound up eventually doing. That led to just a whole lot of interesting things. We had people at the dealership that decided to go out on Friday nights and show off their performance vehicles with friends, go to a parking lot at a strip mall where there was a restaurant, and 10 or 12 people would get together and pop their hoods and talk cars for a few hours. One Friday night, my staff says, why don't you come with us? And I said, a lot of paperwork. We're going to be in early tomorrow. I'll see you guys in the morning. Saturday morning rolls around. I come into the dealership. Nobody shows up to work. I mean, no one. 12 people at the dealership, including me, not one but me showed up. I basically find out 2 days later that everybody had gone up to this parking lot to meet. Word had spread, and instead of 12 or 15 people, they had 260 people and 180 cars show up.
Wow.
All of the local police forces decided to pull together and conduct a raid on this parking lot.
Right.
They arrested 252 people and impounded 153 cars or 173 cars, including my entire staff.
So the question is, are you glad you didn't go, or well, anyway, yeah.
A little of both. So of course, I'm still young, little cockier than I probably should have been at the time. I decided to call all the local news channels and go to war with the county's police because there was, in my opinion, no justifiable reason to do this. This was a town where there were tons of car shows. It was known as a car town. And this was kind of, hey, we don't like young people with nice cars in a parking lot. We're going to cause grief.
Right.
So I basically went to a dozen different businesses and got all of the businesses next to one another that had private roads to agree to give me access to their property after hours. And I built a private property drag course using a number of local businesses where we could conduct Friday night car shows,
Oh, Lord.
keep it legal, and basically ban the police from being part of it because we were on private property.
You're on private property, yeah.
Now, of course, once you put a couple hundred guys together with cars, then you start thinking, well, what else could we be doing to make money? And it's, well, what are we missing? Well, we're missing girls. We need models of some sort. So we started getting all the girls we knew to be part of this car show. And then we realized, well, these girls are hanging out, which are driving more guys, and the guys are always talking to the girls, but the girls aren't selling anything to the guys. So maybe they should have posters and calendars and things they can be selling to the guys. The problem was, none of these girls had portfolios. They weren't professional models. They were just, young people in our circle that we happened to know that were attractive.
Right.
So somebody said, hey, Chris, you can take a picture, right? Maybe you should start taking photos. This led me into photography, which it turned out I was better at taking pictures than I was at circuit racing or running car dealerships. And all of a sudden, I was getting calls up and down the East Coast from models asking me to do portfolio work, to do magazine work, to just help them with imagery. And I kind of pivoted for a few years and started doing professional photography.
Okay.
All while I still had the dealership, all while the circuit racing stuff was still going on. After a while, it got to the point of, circuit racing and models are two areas that are a lot of fun, but also just a lot of drama. And I was getting a little bit older. I had enough of the fun times and said, this just isn't for me anymore. And decided to step out, let some of the guys I was working with take over the circuit racing, stop doing the photography, keep the dealerships. And I decided, this is early 08, let me get my real estate license, because why not? Great time for a real estate
Last
license.
bastion for everyone. Oh, let's just go into real estate.
So I got my real estate license in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And, 9 months later, all of a sudden I'm seeing all of these banks I work with just disappearing.
Oh, yeah.
Thinking to myself, I went from 22 banks to 11 banks in a 2-month window.
Yeah.
And I called Greg, our founder, and I said, hey, I'm not sure what's going on. There's something rumbling in the market. I'm kind of hitting this point that I'm ready for a change and don't know what that should be. And do you have any advice? And he said, well, why don't you come work with me?
Okay.
And I said, yeah, why? I'd be interested in trying it. What are you thinking? He said, well, be an intern. And I kind of thought to myself, well, be an intern. I've already been in the business world for 12 years. I've had a lot of successes. Do I really want to go back to square one? But it's an area I don't really know that well. Let me see what it's like.
Sure.
So for about 3 months, he tortured me. Contact detail updating, calling every person on our database. When we actually look at our CRM system, there is one spike that is kind of like the GameStop frenzy, where it's all real low and then there's this monstrous peak. That was the 3 months I was doing our database.
Okay.
As I'm finishing up the internship, he's looking for a new director of business development and said, I think this is something you should do now that you kind of understand what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Took the role for a couple of years. That led me to take over a CMO for him. And then in 2017, late 2016, I finally stepped in as global CEO as he was starting to think about moving back to chairman status with the long-term plan of becoming chairman emeritus and retiring at some point. And ever since, he and I have been working hand in glove on kind of taking the organization to the next level and building it again. He peaked in 2008. The recession hit everybody. We grew again. Then we hit COVID. And now we're kind of moving a little more digitally. And with every kind of reiteration, we've brought the business to a new and better version of the one before. So it's been an exciting roller coaster, but it's been a very odd way of getting here compared to the track that most people, I think, take in a career.
Well, and we're going to talk a lot about the council and just kind of its journey, because I think it's a really good example of how businesses have to adapt to their marketplaces. And especially when you serve customers that are really doing well one moment and then they're just dying the next moment, and you're trying to keep your business going and stuff. And we'll talk about that. But
yeah, and there's also a very interesting correlation between how you change your business and how, in our case, because we have so many member companies, when and how they're willing to change their business, which is, we can get into that as well, but there's some interesting points to that.
well, and one of the things that your story indicates to me, and thank you for sharing that, is that, and by the way, you left something out I want to come back to, but you obviously had a passion for marketing, a passion for sales, and you clearly have fallen into or pursued intentionally, and that was a question for you. What attracted you to the luxury end of the marketplace at the end of the day? What brought you there?
So I think it's a couple of things. My silly joke is I've got two small kids, and with all the parenting information that's out now, one of the big things they say is, don't ask your young child what they want to be when they grow up, because they only know 4 professions at 3 years old and are going to have to pick one of them. That's something that I kind of jokingly say about myself. If I understood what an actual engineer did, I might have been building rocket ships. If I understood what hedge fund managers or people in arbitration did, I might have gone into finance as opposed to marketing. Mm-hmm. These were things that weren't on my radar until long after. And for me, the reason it was always sales and marketing was, no matter who I talked to or what piece of the business I looked at, it felt like it always came back to sales and marketing, which mm-hmm. I always laugh at, because when you talk to a CFO, the marketing budget is the first thing that everybody cuts. But when you're talking about business, it's the sales and marketing that drives the revenue to the business that supports all the other pieces of it. Without that as the first step, you don't have any money to have a business. So that's what got me initially into the idea of sales and marketing, is that's the lifeblood, the fuel, if you will, of a company. Luxury, it was kind of a two-part. I followed Greg's career. I followed the counsel's career. I was with him when he was creating the idea in my grandmother's backyard 30 years ago. I did my high school mentorship with him. So I knew about the business, I knew about the company, but it wasn't until 2008, and I realized one of the greatest parts about the luxury industry, it's always the last to get hit, and it's always the first to recover. And no matter what happens in the world, unless all of a sudden material goods and money totally go away, there will always be people with money who can afford nice things and want those nice things.
Well, you're really piggyback. It's funny, and I want to say, before we went, I'm trying to think back here. In the late '90s, I was working with a company called John Douglas Company out of Hollywood, and or Beverly Hills, excuse me, and they were the #1 estate brokerage in the United States at that time. And I can remember something Jack Douglas said, which he said, at the end of the day, the affluent always have money. It may slow down a little bit, it may increase a little bit, but he said they're always going to be there. And so they may slow down because they're watching the economy and making some decisions relative to that, but they're always going to be there. And that's why he chose the affluent end of the marketplace to be in. It was more resilient. Yeah,
that's very much Robert Frank. I remember this clear as day. We had him speak at the 21 Club when he wrote Richiston. Mm-hmm. And we had him speak at the 21 Club again when he wrote High Beta Rich. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest discussions when he hit High Beta Rich was, well, we've now been in a recession, and there's all this money that's been lost by all of these super rich people. And well, what about that missing piece of the market? And he said, that money's not gone. It's just moved to a new person. We've lost 50 rich people on this side and picked up 50 rich people on this side. The number hasn't changed. The money's just moved to somebody new. And that was really that aha moment to me of, there's always going to be a luxury market. And, of all the segments you can be in, it's kind of like right now, when you look at anything status luxury with COVID, if you're in high fashion, jewelry, accessories, your business is in the dumps right now because people aren't getting dressed and going out and showing off. But if you're in a home sector right now, your business is through the roof. 5 years ago, if you were in the home sector, you were limping along, and it was all of the status luxury that was going up. Right. So, who's in the crosshairs will always change, but on a broader sense, people with money will always have money. So you're probably safer in luxury than anything else. And I found it to be interesting because to kind of the comment about the one-to-one marketing, that's always been part of my way of doing things. I'm not a fan of cold calling. I don't want to call 10,000 people and hope that 100 are interested. I want a warmed introduction with somebody who's receptive to talking to me. And I want to actually have a conversation, build a relationship, understand what they need, and figure out what we can do to help benefit them in that process. And with the council, that's very much the model, which just naturally fit with how I like to do things.
I said I wanted to come back to something that you missed in your kind of your story of your journey, and that was something you and your wife did. And tell us about Surly Penguin.
Ah, yes.
I'm not going to let you off the hook on this one.
No, not at all. There's actually a bunch of things that I left out just because they were little blips along the years.
Yeah.
Surly Penguin is a great example of that. It was something that, like a lot of the business things that I fall into, it was an accidental, like tripped into it.
Mm-hmm.
My wife one day, this is 2014, it was Valentine's Day, the year we were getting married. And she came to me about 2 weeks before Valentine's Day with her iPad, and she shows me essential oil. And I look at the iPad and it's, an ounce of citrus oil for $1.99 and an ounce of rose oil for $2.29. And I'm thinking to myself, this is insane. Why would I spend $200 on an ounce of citrus oil? It comes from an orange peel. I can buy enough oranges for $10 to squeeze that much essential oil out. And, of course, I can't just say, no, hon, I'm not buying you a Valentine's Day gift. But I said, this doesn't seem like a very smart purchase. Why don't you get me a steam distillation set? I'll make you essential oil. My assumption being that she would say, I'm not doing that. I'll find something else that makes more sense and, pick a different present that's not just excessive for the sake of being excessive, in my opinion.
Right.
Doesn't say a word to me. 2 days later, there's a knock on the door. It's UPS. And here she went on one of the science lab company websites and ordered me a tabletop distillation set. Oh. She gets home from work that night with a big smile on her face because she got the notification it was delivered and said, when are you going to start making me my oil?
Ah.
So, of course, I started doing some research and I started doing steam distillation, which yields almost nothing. I mean, it's your hours and hours of distilling to get a couple of drops of oil. At which point I'm thinking to myself, oh, did I screw up? It's going to take me a year to make an ounce of oil. I'm never going to hear the end of this. I've got to come up with a better process because I'm doomed. And so I go back down the rabbit hole, and then I start finding out about alcohol distillation, which can yield 10 times as much essential oil. And so I said, okay, let's try this. Well, it turns out I can't extract essential oil, but I can make moonshine infused with essential oil. So what I started to produce was this 98% pure ethanol that was infused with rose, citrus, orange, lime, jalapeno, just all sorts of anything that had an oil I started to try. Right. Cinnamon. And I had no idea what to do with this stuff. And so the only thing I could think, I'm now 7 years in with the council. I'm entertaining in the country, bringing friends up from the city, bringing clients up from the city. And I said, I'll just keep this stuff in jars and screw with people when they come up. I'll give them a drink and see what it does to them, because everybody would smell it, take a little sip, go red in the face, gasp for air, exhale, and then the whole room would smell like roses or something else as they're, drinking straight moonshine. And it was always a good chuckle before our night would start. So again, a couple of years, I'm making these jars. We get married. That's summer of 2014. We buy our property. It's a 17-acre forest reserve. We get married. We move in. I'm amassing more and more jars, and they're just sitting on the kitchen counter.
Uh-oh.
Fast forward to fall of 2015, kind of August, right around the wedding. Uh-huh. Turns out that, or August of 2014, all of our raspberry bushes, which we didn't know we had, scattered around this property, went into bloom. Turns out there were more than 2,000 bushes. So all of a sudden, there are raspberry bushes as far as you can see, just with these big, gorgeous, bright red berries on them.
Right.
So I'm on a conference call one day, and I'm looking out the window at all these berry bushes, and I'm like, you know what? It's beautiful outside. I put my headset on, I get a 6-gallon bucket. And while I'm on the phone for 4 hours, I go outside and I just start picking raspberries. By the time the day is over, I've got 6 gallons of berries sitting in the kitchen. My wife comes home from work. She's from Pennsylvania. And I'm thinking, in typical Jersey fashion, I did all the picking. I'm going to get jelly or a pie or something great out of this. She's had a very long day at work. And when she gets in the door, she takes one look at the bucket and verbatim, she rolls her eyes and says, "Why don't you juice those berries and mix them with that shit you made and get those jars off my kitchen counter?" So I did.
There it is. Yeah.
Better than Chambord.
Oh.
I mean, absolutely amazing, because one, it scaled the alcohol rate back to 40% because I was blending it with juice and it became tolerable.
Right.
2, the infusion of essential oil gave me a more robust flavor that I could either complement with another flavor or intensify the original flavor. You've suddenly got orange juice and orange essential oil, and now you have an orange liqueur that's just packed with flavor. And I started to say, well, we've got the most fertile farmland in the country. Nobody's doing anything like this. Most alcohol is about percentage first, followed by taste. If you think about Absolute and all their flavors, sure, none of them taste like a flavor they say. They're all just nasty. They're vodka with a nasty chemical component. Yeah. Nothing tastes delicious as an alcohol usually. So I wanted to focus on flavor first. And we started talking to some of the local farms, local orchards. And by 2015, we had produced about 20 different flavors. We went through the whole 18-month federal process of becoming a distillery and getting zoned, and won't bore you with all of those nightmare details, other than we had to do a 30-page application to be approved to do the 300-page application.
Oh, Lord.
So, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Went into business, had some early success locally, got endorsed by the White House, some celebrity chefs, some musicians, started placing product in a lot of the high-end properties in the city. And after a couple of years, decided it was a lot of work and not a lot of early return, because if you're not really scaled up, it's a lot of work for, a lot less in your hand cash than you'd expect.
Yeah.
And decided to sell the formulas and kind of just shutter the business, which we did by early 2018. Part of the deal was we were left with all the old product we produced. So we've got, $300,000 worth of booze that we've been donating for the last few years to charities, and have been able to leverage the now closed business as a way to help drive awareness for the American Heart Association, the American Cancer Society, and some other really great charities that do a lot of good and can always use ways to market to people with lots of money to donate, which was the other kind of connection.
Well, I look forward to
that was our brand.
I look forward to receiving one of those bottles.
when you're in New York next, we'll do a couple of days in the country for some strategy. You'll be taking a few cases with you.
I like it. Well, now let's move on a little bit and talk about luxury. Luxury means so many different things to some people. What does it mean to you?
Well, I guess there's 2 answers to that. Are we talking luxury as far as the market, the business, the product, the companies, the council, or are we talking my definition of luxury? Because they really are different.
Well, and I think let's go with yours, because, we're going to talk about the council and kind of how luxury is moved and perceived and all that. But I want to kind of hear your thinking on it, and I'll share with you what I think of when I think of luxury.
Mine has changed over the years. Mm-hmm. So, obviously it's kind of like the Mark Twain comment about, when I was a kid, my father was so brilliant. When I was 18, I thought he was the dumbest person in the world. And by the time I hit 20, I couldn't figure out how he got so smart.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's a good way to explain my definition of luxury, because it started with, the product and the aspiration of having something. I grew up in, Jersey and Elizabeth, working class kid. Dad was a furniture mover. Mom was a nurse. We were never, that I could tell, broke, but we definitely did not have a lot. Right. And it was always the big city and the fancy cars and the nice clothes and all this stuff was what I thought luxury was before I knew better. Now, skipping all the iterations, now for me, it's time. I've got, a 3-year-old and a 20-month-old, and biggest luxury for me is sitting with my kids on a Sunday afternoon when I'm not on the phone, nobody's interrupting me, and my son's jumping up and down on the bed, and my daughter's bringing a marker over and said, "Daddy, draw snowman," and I'm just engaged with them and being in the present with them. That's probably my greatest luxury, just having time with them now.
You know, it's it's a great example of kind of what I consider to be my definition of luxury, where I say to people, look, luxury is not about a price point. It's about an experience. And you're talking about an experience to that very end. And I think it changes at various stages of our lives as to what we consider luxury. I mean, there was a time when it was all about flash and sizzle, right? When you think about the evolution of the consumer's mindset.
And if you want, I can go into that whole psychology of how the mind works with it. American Express did some brilliant research and has actually been able to distill luxury into 4 separate stages, where we are versus where some of the other BRIC countries are at right now, and how the mindset changes across the board on luxury. It's interesting because part of it is age, part of it is also just education and exposure to luxury. The longer you're in it, the farther up the food chain you go, and it's suddenly not price and logo, but how does this benefit me, benefit my family, do something to give us a better time or experience together.
Well, and let's touch on those 4 areas, because it'll lead us into the conversation about where is the current luxury consumer? Because I think that's changed a lot in the last few years.
Yeah, it absolutely has. So the 4 stages of luxury are acquisitive, inquisitive, authoritative, and meditative.
Okay.
And the shortest definition for each. Acquisitive is, I don't know a thing about luxury. I don't really care to know anything about luxury. I have a lot of money. I want a big freaking splashy label so everybody knows it's expensive. And the more I can spend on it, the better, because I can brag about my t-shirt that cost me $5,000 and has a giant Gucci G from neck to belly button on it. Inquisitive is, it's still all about stuff. I don't know anything about stuff, but I want to know, why does that giant G Gucci t-shirt cost $5,000? What makes it so much better than a $10 t-shirt that you can buy at Walmart? Still going to rely on the salespeople. I can't make my decisions. I can't tell you why something is good, why something is not. I cannot distinguish between one luxury brand and another, but I want to learn. Authoritative, still all about the stuff, but I now understand the stuff. I know why this stuff costs what it does. The salesperson might recommend something to me, but I know what I like. I know why I like it. I know which brand I want, and I know how that product will relate to me. Mm-hmm. Meditative is the last phase of luxury. And interestingly, in the US, kind of hopping a little bit, 1970s to about 2010 was the progression for us to get through those 4 stages.
Okay.
2006 to 2020 is what it took for mainland China to do that.
Interesting.
Except they're still just starting to crest into meditative. Meditative is, forget the stuff. Product doesn't matter. It's how does that product translate into making my life easier, better, giving me more time with my kids, giving me a memory with them that they're going to remember and we're going to talk about for years, allow me to have a better, enjoyable experience. Hey, it's COVID times. I want to go away with my family. If I fly privately and rent a villa, I can have an experience with my wife, my kids, my parents, my aunts, my uncles. We're safe, and we do something together where these luxury items and services are benefiting us as a group, as opposed to it's for the sake of having it.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. It's almost, it reminds me of Maslow's hierarchy of needs a little bit, right? It's like,
and here's the best part. COVID has done a great job at knocking out all of that authoritative piece that was still lingering. Because if you think back to end of 2019, early 2020, got to have the Birkin bag. Got to have the bespoke suit. You've got to Instagram everything. You've got to selfie your food. You've got to be updating your status every 20 minutes. You've got to be seen. Me. How do I look? Am I at the right club, the right restaurant, the right circle? Do I have the right shoes? And what people have realized after a year of being locked in is that's not the important thing. These items that are great from a status perspective are quality made. Some of them will last a lifetime and are worth buying for those exact reasons. Mm-hmm. But when people aren't looking at you and it's not all about, ooh, I'm important because I have this, how valuable are those products really? How valuable is that attention really? Will that attention keep you from getting COVID? Will that make you feel better about your grandmother passing away? Will that allow you to hug your family member that you haven't been able to see in 3 months? Yeah. And what people are quickly realizing is the answer to all of that is no.
Yeah.
And so they're starting to rethink priorities yet again and saying it's more meditative than it's ever been before, because this really, if I'm going to spend it while I see people in line starving and standing in 6-mile food lines, it better do something more than just be a look at me. And that's one of the reasons all these celebrities are getting backlash for their, insensitive posts, because it's look at my new Birkin bag that could have fed 1,000 people that you don't need, that nobody cares about your status anymore.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm thinking about an experience that my fiance and I have had we have a favorite restaurant, a French restaurant that we have in Chicago. And it was always fun to go and, get dressed up and dolled up and look great and be seen, so to speak. Right. And then COVID happened and it was closed. And then we recently went back and had our first dinner there after 9 months. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't about any of that now. It was about, you missed just being with these great people and you appreciated not only the food more, but the fact that these workers were working so hard to be there. It really changed the perspective. I think just supporting what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the joke my wife and I have is I'm the Philistine when it comes to food.
Uh-huh.
Do per se, do a 16-course tasting for $1,000, and if you leave hungry, it wasn't worth a nickel to me. And we've actually gone out after a dinner and I've gone and gotten a cheeseburger because I'm like $800 later and my 6 bites of food. And so what I've started to learn is, to your exact point, we've started to tailor who we work with. Mm-hmm. And it's not just how expensive is this food? Right. It's what's the whole package. So, I'm going to shout out one of my favorite restaurants, Davio's. Steve DiFilippo, genius restaurateur, because he's been doing it for 30 plus years. And his thing is, it's all about the guest. He even wrote a book called It's All About the Guest. But it's not just the guest that walks through the front door. It's the guest that comes through the back door as well and takes care of the guest coming through the front door. And when I think about Davio's and I think about going there, because we would host events there all the time before the pandemic, their food was delicious. I miss their food. Mm-hmm. But more than I miss their food, I miss the relationship, because they knew my name. They were friends. There were people that, the hostess had a baby within a month of me, and every time we'd see each other, we would share photos of our kids. I'd give the waiter a hug because I've known the guy for 6 years, and he has been my go-to waiter for every event we host because he does a flawless job. Right. And it's missing that connection. I never went to be seen. I was like, give me a back room where nobody can see me. I don't need to be seen. But now it's missing that relationship. And it's not just about the expensive or the fancy. It's about who treats you in a way that you feel special. You don't have to feel important. You have to feel special. And there are plenty of places that can make you feel important, but they don't make you feel special. The ones that do it right make you feel special. And when you go back, you realize that's what you missed. You missed that relationship more than you missed all the other stuff.
Exactly right. Yeah, there was a restaurant. My favorite restaurant in the world is a restaurant in Washington, D.C. It's Michelle Richard's place. And he, one of the things that over 20 years, because I would go into Washington, D.C. for conferences and I'd be there 5 days and I would always have at least one meal there. But so his team, so to speak, saw me over many, many, many years. And I don't know how they do, now today I actually do know how they do this, but they literally, when I walked into the restaurant and they said, Mr. Perotti, So fine to have you back. I see it's been, well, 9 months since you were here last, or 3. And I'm going, yeah, and your regular table. And so they would take me to the table that I love overlooking the kitchen. And then Michel would come out himself and say, hey, it's great to have you back. And granted, it was a very high-end restaurant. I mean, it was obviously very 5-star-ish and all that. But it wasn't, I didn't really care about the money. It was about this wonderful experience. And him sharing, and he would talk about his kids with me, and what are your kids doing, and how. And so all of that is right in line with what we're talking about. Well, let me pivot to the Luxury Marketing Council. Tell us, what is the Luxury Marketing Council? What does it do?
So my stupid joke is we are the best kept secret in luxury. We have been around since 1994. We have served thousands of luxury brands in well over 60 cities worldwide, more than 10,000 CEOs and CMOs over a 30-year window. The catch is, if you don't know us and if you're not a member, you probably have no clue who we are. We don't advertise. We do very little PR. We're by invitation only, and we intentionally keep a low profile.
Right.
So what we are is we are a collection and a membership organization for decision makers of luxury brands, primarily CEO, CMO, EVP, SVP, your global head of partnership, strategy, biz dev, publishers, associate publishers, managing and senior partners. Simplest way to say it, people that control their own budget and can make a decision for the brand without asking permission.
Okay.
Those are the biggest requirements. And what we do is a couple of different things. Number one, we serve as, if not the global thought leader, one of the global thought leaders on the luxury market, how it's changing, who are the best customers, how are they changing, and then most importantly, what are the smartest brands doing to get the people with the most money to spend more money? Now, the question I always get is, well, what makes you the global thought leader? And the answer is, it's not about us. It's about our community. So when you work with McKinsey and BCG and Bain and American Express and all of the big organizations that conduct research and track customer behavior and deal with the highest net worth customer on the best possible scale, that collective wisdom, which is brought back to us daily, lets us outpace any individual brand because we have it from everyone.
Well, and at the end of the day, you're sharing that information amongst the members, right? I mean,
of course.
I mean, just having been on some phone calls with you guys and stuff, it's very, there's definitely a free flowing of information. I don't think anybody's like, oh, I don't want to talk about that because I don't want anybody to know. No. It's more about, everybody's looking for ideas and ways. Yeah.
And that's because we've always been early to the dance. So when Greg started the council in 94, travel talked to travel, jewelry talked to jewelry,
right?
Fashion talked to fashion. Nobody talked to one another.
Right.
Nobody shared database. Nobody shared lists. Nobody partnered. It was, this is my list. These are my customers. Stay away. You're going to take them. He was the first one to say, why can't a hotel learn something from a cruise line? Why can't an auto brand learn something from a jet company? Why can't a fashion house learn from a jewelry company? And more important than that, every one of these brands, it's essentially a law of luxury. Every brand is sharing 60% of their best customer with every other brand.
Right. It's
just not the same 60%.
Right.
So at the end, bigger than that, the idea of competing brands in retail. I'm Bentley. Well, I'm Rolls Royce. Well, we can't ever work together because the customer's going to buy Bentley or Rolls Royce. If you're worth $100 million, you're not buying a Bentley or a Rolls Royce. You're buying both and 12 other cars. There is no competition at that level. The customer doesn't choose one, they choose all.
Right.
And then above and beyond just the education, then it's really saying to these brands, okay, part two, we're going to help you guys learn about each other and understand each other. We're going to take the blinders off and make sure that every brand in the luxury industry knows every other brand in the luxury industry because you all can be working together. There's value that you all share with one another at some point in some way, even if you don't initially see it. And then we help figure out ways to share cost, share database, share special events, create partnerships to surprise and delight the top customers. All of this is great in theory. You know, you put 100 brands in the room, explain this and say, go at it, guys. You'll see a little bit of something. But the last piece of what we do that really separates us, I think, is we serve as a strategic introducing broker and actually look at the brands, figure out where the opportunities are, and make the connections based upon that so that the brands can then figure out creative ways to do things together. Excellent.
Excellent. You know, you're reminding me, I guess I was a broker, real estate broker in the luxury arena I'll just say for a long time. But I would say probably 8 or 9 years into my career, I was a top producer with a major franchise brand and got an opportunity to go to a conference. And the speaker that was speaking at this one particular marketing session was a representative from Cadillac. And they were bringing some ideas that they were doing. And I realized at that point, and that's to your point of what Greg was saying, there's, you know, sharing of ideas across products is really brilliant because you don't have all the ideas. You're just, nobody's that brilliant. And B, because we get locked into our own paradigm of the way we view our business,
right? We
don't open up to, wow, other ideas. And so I think that I think it's a great idea that you can talk, you know, that the hotel company can talk to the jeweler, and we've done it in real estate since then. I've always made a point of having high-end luxury cars and the art dealer and the, you know, and bringing these things together to create collaborations.
There's also an opportunity from an outside perspective standpoint where, you know, you can't see the forest through the trees all the time because you're so in the business, and having brands outside of your segment talk to you sometimes will help you see things in a new way because they're not so deep into your business that they can't see things differently. The last piece is for us, because we're not in retail. I mean, we all have some sort of, you know, everybody in the council has some sort of background in luxury, but none of us are in retail and in the business. It lets us take a step back and connect dots that most people can't connect, because we can say, here's your initial impression and the initial opportunity between two brands, but we know both these brands well enough that we take it a step farther and say, okay, this CEO's friends are perfect customers for brand B. Brand B, their customers aren't right for brand A. They're not right for brand A, but their customers' customers are perfect partners for brand A. Right. And you got to start going down the rabbit hole between companies. And for us, it's relationship. It's building the connection with the individual and the company where we know enough about each brand that we can connect those dots and say, okay, I know that this person's spouse is the partner or the connection that I need to make between these two brands, and vice versa. When if you just put the two brands on the table, they're not going to think far enough along to say, well, I can't do anything with you, but your wife and I should be doing business together, and through your referral, it's going to help move both of the needles for our businesses.
Yeah, yeah. Could you cite some of the kind of maybe a couple of the more successful collaborations that the Marketing Council has facilitated between some brands?
Yeah. Okay, so there's all sorts. My personal favorite, just because it's a very smart one with two brands that have nothing to do with one another, Rolls-Royce and Brioni.
Okay.
You know, super high-end, best-in-class automobiles, some of the best suits in the world. One hand you got cars, one hand you got clothes. Other than they both start with a C, there's not too much else that, you know, kind of fits. Until you start thinking about who's buying the Rolls-Royce and who's buying the Brioni suit. If you can afford a $10,000 custom fit suit, you can afford a $250,000 custom vehicle. And if you were that customer buying that $250,000 vehicle, a handwritten thank you note, a $100 restaurant gift certificate is almost should you even bother? Does it really do anything? Or is it almost could you spare it when you talk that kind of money? So Brioni and Rolls-Royce. Now, when you buy a $250,000 or better Rolls-Royce, you are gifted 2 $5,000 custom fit blazers by Rolls-Royce as a thank you, produced by Brioni. Brioni is obviously selling them to Rolls-Royce on a good business basis at a slightly better than retail rate. Rolls-Royce is happy to incur the cost because talk about a gift when you buy a $250,000 car, his and hers, custom blazer that you can now wear while you're in your car because it matches is incredible. For Brioni, it's now introducing a customer that can obviously afford the clothing to the clothing. For the customer, they feel appreciated and they actually feel like they've been given something worth their status. And Rolls-Royce secures another purchase down the road because they've kept their customer happy. So it's win-win-win.
Okay, that's a great example.
The New York Opera House and Seabourn Cruise Lines. Absolutely nothing in common.
Unless you're going to do an opera show on a cruise line, yeah.
Except for the fact that people who pay a lot of money to go to the opera have a direct correlation with people who pay a lot of money to go on a cruise. They're a similar age. They're a similar demographic. They spend a lot of money on something that's, quote, entertainment for them.
Right. So
we put together a high seas on the high seas cruise. Opera lovers paid a premium to do a 10-day Mediterranean cruise where the New York Opera House performed on board.
Oh, wow.
It provided new customers to the Opera House from cruise lovers, and it provided the cruise line new customers from high-end patrons of the opera that were never on a ship.
Wow.
Or on one of their ships.
I like that. I think it's it really demonstrates the value of just talking, and relationships. It really does.
Now I could give you 10,000 more, but I know our podcast can only go on for so long.
We will run forever. Yes. How are you in working with kind of these luxury businesses and brands that you're doing, and some of which are global and some of which are local? How do you think the business of luxury has changed in the last few years? And I mean, I guess we can look at COVID as a question, but it's really, I think that's an oddity. I mean, maybe that's not. Maybe that's just the way it's going to influence us. How do you think that the luxury brands have changed, or the business of luxury has changed in the last few years? And
it's moving next year? It's interesting you ask that because and especially talking on the COVID part, because it's something that I've been going back and forth on. Is COVID the oddity, or is it just another catalyst that moves this to the next level? And it's kind of like saying 9/11, right. We look back at air travel before 9/11 and after, and it was bound to happen. Was it 9/11 just happened to be that tipping point to move it to what it is today? And if it wasn't 9/11, would it have been something else? So I think starting with the initial idea of luxury on the business side, Stanley Marcus said it best. The best that the mind of man can imagine and the hand of man create is what luxury is supposed to be.
Right.
And I think no matter if you talk product or service, that is still 100% true. So it's not just what product the mind of man can imagine and the hand of man can create. What's the experience? What's the service? Whatever else it may be. So I think that was always the initial idea of luxury. Now, when you look back, let's go all the way back to like the 80s. Back when we were still unrefined about luxury and we're still learning luxury. It was very much high dollar, high flash, very exclusive. You shouldn't even know what this is if you can't afford it. We want it so secretive that you got to be part of the club to even know what the brand is.
Right.
That went by the wayside with the invention of the internet and the idea that now luxury could be known by all, but only owned by a few. Again, still a great idea, kind of fits. Then we got into this kind of global economy where it was, hey, we are a French powerhouse, but we can produce this stuff in China for a third of the price. And all of a sudden, it's still the best that the mind of man can imagine, but now it's, instead of that artisanal 5th generation hand that's creating it, it's we can ship it to a factory and create it twice as quick and make more of it.
Right.
So we started to get away from having as an exclusive an idea of luxury. At the same time, we started to have more and more people hear about luxury and aspire to luxury. And this was always a big conversation right around the 2008-9 recession, the loss of the aspirational customer and how brands were riding a 10-year window of, I will save for 6 months to buy the Louis Vuitton purse because I wish I had one like these celebrities did. And I will take the time to save the money to get my one little piece of luxury. When the recession hit, it was, I need to make sure I have food on the table. I no longer can save for 6 months to have this little piece of luxury. And all of a sudden, luxury started to scale back, and it became less about flash. You know, there was the rumor of the brown paper bag, because you couldn't walk out of Hermes with an orange bag during the recession because you were hated if you bought something expensive during the recession as an idea. And I think that was kind of that pivoting moment of, we had the iPhone launch, we had the recession, we had boomers that were going to retire that lost half of their retirement and couldn't retire. We had millennials that were just coming into the industry and were expecting a quick rise through the ranks, a ton of promotion, a ton of money. And they were told, sorry, guys, you're on hold for another decade because people that have been here for 20 years aren't going anywhere. You had a group of Gen Zers that were little wet behind the ear kids that barely understood any of this, but were seeing the entire world change and implode in front of them. Over the next, let's call it 8 years, kind of 2016, social media started to take over. A younger generation had a much louder voice than ever before. There was a dilution of media where it used to be you'd advertise in the Times or the Journal if you were a brand, and that's how you showcased your wares, or you had a giant billboard or a TV commercial. Now you have 10,000 avenues of advertising that can cost you nothing to a fortune, reach and segment to an audience in ways that you never could before. And brands were kind of put in the crossfire of, we now can have a global presence and a global awareness, even though only 1% of this global awareness can buy our stuff. And how do we now juggle awareness versus customer? And how do we talk? And the director of marketing for Balm and Mercier, a gentleman named Michael Arilli, who I knew a decade ago, was on a panel around Facebook, just as Facebook was hot and popular, 2012 or 13. And the discussion was, well, you know, you guys have hundreds of thousands of followers, and what do you do with all the comments? And his exact comment was, we're not a 12-year-old girl. We don't respond to everything real time. We don't answer every question and reply to every comment that every person makes. We talk to our customers when it's appropriate. And otherwise, we don't care.
Wow.
And it was eye-opening in a way, because it totally shaped the whole issue of, well, what do you do when you have 1 million followers, but there's only 10,000 people that can buy your product?
Right.
And at the time, cancel culture wasn't really front and center yet. So it really became this, we want to make awareness known, but we want to stay exclusive. And suddenly luxury lost a little bit of its exclusivity because everybody knew about it.
Right.
But at the same time, it elevated it, because just because you knew about it didn't mean you could have it. As we hit 16, new president.
Yeah.
A new wave of social media platforms. A whole new set of discussions and issues, climate change, social justice, equality in a whole new way, on a whole new scale. And, and I'm sure people aren't going to like that I say this, but I find it to be totally truthful, a sense of my voice matters and entitlement that every generation before us had, but amplified with a megaphone that no generation has had before. If you look back in the 60s at all the flower children, they were protesting and making as much noise as the millennials and Gen Zers were, but their voice did not carry anywhere near as far.
Right.
Or as quickly. And it's like saying, if you could have been, an 18-year-old during the Vietnam War and go on national TV every day of the week and talk to 10 million Americans, what might that have done back in the 60s? That's what all these kids today suddenly have the ability to do. You can speak to 20 million people at 20 years old if you have the right following, whether what you're saying is backed with any experience or just good ideas or ideology or anything else. So where it's starting to move luxury is it's changing the way brands are seeing the world, because they have to be sensitive to something entirely different that they didn't before. These individuals now have better access and better command over finances of their parents, because the world is changing so quickly. The older generations can't keep up and are relying more on a younger generation to help them keep up. So all of a sudden, somebody that wasn't relevant in luxury 5 years ago because they couldn't afford it, even though they still can't afford it, they are the influencer that's helping the person that can afford it make the decision.
Yeah, you're really hitting on the importance of. I was just one of my questions I had for you was just the importance of social media in luxury. The voices. Social media was like, oh, that's nice.
It's still like, that's nice, because at the end of the day, you cannot like, track an ROI.
Yeah.
So while social media is great, does it hit the bottom line is the answer that nobody really has.
Yeah.
And, there's another piece of this, which again, going back to the idea of, factories and increasing market size and increasing product size and the dilution of a brand. I mean, 20 years ago, if you said to Armani, you're going to have Armani Exchange, nobody would have believed it. Now that you got 5 tiers of a brand from cheap to expensive, so that even though you're a luxury brand, you can be found at Walmart. Has diluted the brand. So the other thing you're seeing is an issue with what is really luxury versus what is premium. If you have a Stradivarius, if you have got a Bugatti, they produce 1,000 Bugattis or 5,000 Bugattis a year. Full stop. That's what's available. They're not mass marketing these and saying, well, everybody can have one. We have 200 people that want a Ferrari. We make 199. That's why we're still a luxury product. We have less product than demand.
Right.
And when you're talking at certain levels, you don't need to advertise. You don't need people to know what the product is, because your group is so small that social media is almost a waste. I don't see Bugatti on social media bragging about their new vehicles. I see everybody else bragging about the vehicles for them, because they're like, we sell 300 of these a year. We don't even need a social media presence to hit those 300 customers. So that's the other thing, is as luxury is becoming more democratic, you're seeing a dilution in what the brand stands for, which requires more marketing because you're going more mass.
Right. Let me. We're getting close to the end of our time, and I want to hit a couple of questions for you. How is the Luxury Marketing Council going to be? What are the initiatives that you're looking at, to address this ever-changing luxury customer base and helping your constituents, your members? What are you guys looking to do this next couple of years?
It's an interesting question, because this goes back to the comment about, being ahead of the dance.
Mm-hmm.
We were the first ones to say, well, brands should be talking across all segments of luxury. We closed our doors and went fully virtual at the end of 2013. And for the last 7 years, I've been saying you can work so much more efficiently not going to an office every day.
Mm-hmm.
People are finally starting to catch up with that as an idea.
Yeah.
So part of it is not just what are we thinking about, but what are brands able to digest? If we had said back in 2013, all right, everything is now virtual, we're going to do only virtual events and we're not going to meet in person anymore because we've gone virtual, we'd have no customers. None of the brands were ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have some plans for us internally as a way to kind of keep us ahead of the curve.
Mm-hmm.
I think the bigger discussion is facing the members, what we're looking to do.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, it's understanding what they need, and it's having the conversations to understand what they're wrestling with. One of the big ones is what needs to be in person, which against what can be digital. How can we engage our customers, and do we need to do certain things to engage them, or can we do other things that may be more, less cost prohibitive and get us better access? So one part of it is understanding what the brands are going to need and then helping them figure out the proper way to pivot. So it may be, hey, instead of 10 events this year, it's going to be 4 events you're hosting that we're going to help with. We're also going to give you some insights on how to go digital. Okay. On our side, it's going to be a lot more content available to all members,
mm-hmm.
a much deeper incorporation of every chapter into a national membership, so that if you're in Chicago, if you're in Boston, if you're in Connecticut, if you're in San Francisco, if you're in Atlanta, if you're in New York, you're not just going to get what's going on in New York, you're going to get what's going on nationally, because now it's like the work from anywhere comment. You can live in Bermuda and work right now. Well, if that's the case, why are you only going to see information to your little town when you could be seeing it nationally? So we're going to go for a much larger national opportunity. one thing we are not going to change is for 28 years, it has been about relationship. It has been about sit down at the table, break bread, drink wine, shake a person's hand, get to know them, and build something deeper than just how can I make money from you and vice versa.
Exactly.
That's all coming back. It
Yeah.
may not be till 2022 when we're safe to be in person, but we will go back to our original model because that's what separates us from everybody else is we understand relationship. Now, obviously, if we can only do that 6 times a year, if it has to be in spring and summer when it's safer, we'll make whatever adjustments are needed and make sure to find additional ways to drive value. So a lot more digital, a lot more content, but a refusal, an absolute, I will be drug kicking and screaming across the line. We will go back to the way it used to be because that is the best way to build a relationship is in person when you can let the guard down and have the time to get to know somebody.
Right. I mean, I think of relationship as one of the top elements, if you will, of luxury. And I've just seen too many times when, you hear, oh, it's all about who you know, not about what you know. And I don't 100% agree with that, but I do think that there are moments where 2 people talking or 3 or 4 people talking around a table can learn more about each other and how to move and perpetuate their brands further, having nothing to do with how can I benefit off of you kind of nonsense, but really value that relationship and that conversation. So I'm glad you said that.
Well, and you said something right there. It's the comment of it's not who you know, it's what you know. I've always said it's who you know and what they know.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, I'm going to finish with that little insight. So thank you. Chris, thank you very much for being on the podcast with us as our first guest, if you will. I will share with you that that we've launched this concept and we already have 5 guest interviews scheduled for the next 2 weeks.
That's great.
Yeah, it's exploding, which is really great. And I think that people are interested in really telling their stories a little bit to the world.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And thank you for joining us. And we'll be talking to you out there in the industry.
Can't wait, my friend. Talk soon.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, bud.
Thank you for listening in on this episode of Living a Luxury Life. This program is brought to you by the Luxury Marketing Council, a global network of leaders and influencers in the international luxury industry. Join us next time as we discuss trending topics with luxury lifestyle influencers. I'm your host, Cliff Perotti. Thank you for tuning in.